So every crisis that we face in the world today, including things like our global pandemic, poverty, climate change, the climate crisis, our crisis of inequality and injustice, our leadership crisis, our economic crisis, all of these, all of the crises that we experience, they're just symptoms of a deeper crisis. And that's a crisis of power loss. So we want to see how each of us can become agents of personal change, but not just personal change, social change, by reclaiming our power. And that doesn't mean that you have to be out and be a social justice warrior or a activist out there marching the streets. Not at all. We can be activists, inner activists. That's how in yoga wisdom tradition, they think of it, becoming an inner activist. And by becoming an inner activist, we affect the collective, of course. So I think we all get that idea of how by doing this work ourselves, we are affecting social change. And we're going to really dive into it and explore how and why this is true. So we do need to begin by looking at what the root cause of power loss is in this context of karma. So this diagram should look really, really familiar to you. So we know that that karmic results are caused by actions, but it's not just actions. Actions are influenced by our desire, and our desire is influenced by who we know ourselves to be. So a lot of personal development experts, or if you were to Google online power, or what does it mean to be powerful, a lot of definitions that you'll see out there say that the ability or to have power means the ability to influence others. But the way that we're looking at this term power and power loss is going to be within the context of karma. Of course, it's the big context, but more specifically, the root cause of power loss is actually not knowing the truth of who we are. So essentially, power loss is the symptom of an identity crisis or a case of mistaken identity. And so we'll go deeper. Obviously, I'm giving you a big, broad brush strokes of this so that you can sort of get the big picture as we dive into it. Power loss is a karmic result based on a misconception of the truth of who we are. But when we stay in that, or when we find ourselves time and time again in a situation in which we're in a state of power loss, then power loss becomes a karmic pattern. And this is where it's really important to understand that wherever you have power loss in your life or have experienced power loss, there is a karmic pattern to look at. So remember, in karma and relationships, we talked about wherever there's jealousy or denial or anger, there's going to be a karmic pattern. This is another place to look for a karmic pattern, is with power loss. So every time you have a karmic pattern, there will almost always be power loss with it. But we're saying here that power loss is a karmic pattern. And with that karmic pattern, there might be judgment, there might be denial, there might be anger in that karmic pattern of power loss. Oftentimes in the karmic pattern of power loss, there's a lot of anger and resentment because we're not in a state of power. And so we feel like we've been wronged, right? So that's what happens when we have this karmic pattern of power loss. So again, we have to be able to answer this question, who am I? Now, authentic power is really just the result of knowing the truth of who you are, being able to answer this question right here on the screen: who am I? But right, powerlessness or power loss is actually the effect, as I've already said, of not knowing the truth of who we are and not really having an awareness or a true understanding of answering this question. So most of the time, most of the information that you'll find online that comes from, you know, whether it's psychology or pop psychology or what's the newest, greatest thing, they take this question, who am I, and they answer it from one perspective. And what yoga wisdom tradition tells us is that there's actually two perspectives that we have to be able to answer this question from. And if you only answer the question from one perspective, you're only getting half of the answer of who you are. And in what you'll see out there normally online or in any book you can pick up from Amazon is they're answering the question, who am I, from the perspective of relative reality. Whether it's a scientific perspective or a psychological perspective, Western psychology, they're looking at the answer to this question from the perspective of relative reality. So if you're doing that, that's okay, but you just have to know that you only have half of an understanding of who you really are. So again, we have to consider these two levels of reality. So the first level of reality that we want to remember that is coexistent all the time with this reality that we're in is absolute reality. And absolute reality is the undifferentiated, unmanifested spirit. In yoga, it's called Satchitananda, which just means ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. So this is just a descriptor of what absolute reality is. Absolute reality is ever conscious or aware. You can interchange those two words. Ever existing. It doesn't change. It's always there. It permeates everything. And there is a sense of joy or bliss. So that's the first level of reality. Absolute reality, we don't see it. It's ever existing. It's here. It permeates everything. But most of us, most of the time, aren't tapped into it. Second level of reality, which we're all tapped into all the time and we're very aware of, is relative reality, manifest reality, and it consists of the manifest world and everything in it. And both of these levels of reality, the dual relative reality and the non-dual level of reality, they coexist at the same time. And again, most of us, most of the time, are only aware of ourselves and of our life in the context of relative reality. So we experience ourself primarily, if not only, right, from that level of awareness, from the level of relative reality, even though there's this whole other experience of self that's available to us. We just don't experience it. So we want to look at what is the answer to the question, who am I, from the perspective of absolute reality and relative reality. I am a true self. So in yoga tradition, true self can also, other terms for it have been the Atman, our Buddha nature, or our essence nature, Christ consciousness, if we're looking at mystical Christianity. So these are just some of the terms that are used to describe or to answer that question, who am I, from that level of absolute reality. So in modern times, this term often gets used interchangeably with authentic self, especially in my world of personal growth coaches and therapists, but they're really only using that term from the perspective of relative reality. So that term authentic self is generally used in the case of relative reality, not absolute reality. So that's an important distinction. So this true self is an experience. I can't just tell you, even though I'm telling you the answer, who are you at the level of absolute reality as a true self, even though I'm telling you that answer, it doesn't really do you any good unless you have a felt experience of what it means to be a true self. So true self is that aspect of you which is a pure reflection of the one divine love intelligence of spirit, and it exists again as that aspect of ourself which is ever present, ever aware, and is filled with joy and bliss. So we need to have that bit of understanding. So if we go back to here, if we look at the very top, when we know that we are a true self, we're going to know that we are whole and complete as we are. So there's this, then we have the second way to answer this, which is from the, looking at it from the perspective of relative reality. So when we operate within an awareness of ourself in relative reality at our very highest level of consciousness, what happens is we experience ourselves as a unique expression of the divine that lives in us, as us, and through us. So this is the term unique self, and unique self is a term that's pretty much used very commonly now in the spiritual world, in the psychology, therapy, coaching world. So you may have heard this term already before, but what unique self means is that we are a unique expression of the divine love intelligence that lives in, as, and through you. It means that I am God having a Lisa experience. It means that you are God having a Jennifer experience, that you are God having a Basim experience. So there's this example that's used in yoga tradition quite a bit, and it's called the ocean and the wave example. And when you think of an ocean and you think of the waves in the ocean, we can understand that waves are not the ocean. They're just a part of the ocean, but they're not the ocean itself. We also understand that waves come in all different shapes and sizes, and eventually their life is going to come to an end as they, make their way from the deep sea and they travel all the way across the sea. And at some point, a wave will come to its death on the shores, so to speak, and then be consumed back into the ocean once again. So in the same way, we are each unique expressions of spirit that inhabit a body. We inhabit a life that's temporary and that's impermanent. And when spirit then manifests in relative reality, what we understand and what we can know for sure logically, just we've seen it, we've experienced, is that spirit manifests as diversity, uniqueness. There are no two things identical in manifest reality, including identical twins, right? We know that twins can be very different. They might look the same, but even their genetics are slightly different. Their personalities are different. No two flowers are the same. You can't look at anything in this world and have an exact replica of it if it was, if it's a natural thing, right? So this is including obviously plants, animals, humans. We're all unique selves. And the thing is that we all experience our uniqueness as a very, very deep truth. Whether we articulate that or not, it's just a knowing. You know that you're unique. You know that there's no one that thinks exactly like you, that obviously doesn't look like you, doesn't behave like you, doesn't have the same perspective on life as you do. So the teachings of yoga tell us that while it's important that we deconstruct ourselves and we realize our true self, which is what we just talked about, we can never escape our diversity. We can never escape our uniqueness, right? So when we realize our uniqueness, we discover that, you know what? I'm not replaceable and you're not replaceable. And that there never is, was, or will be anyone who can fill our shoes. And this is where, you know, you can pretty easily tie this to a lot of crimes that are, or torture, or you know, things that happen that are completely unjust in the world, like humans against humans. It's this really important piece where the only way that someone can commit a horrible crime against another person is to dehumanize them, to not see their uniqueness, to make them non-human, right? So it's a way of not seeing someone's uniqueness that allows someone to do torturous things to other people. So the key here is that in realizing our own uniqueness, it dissolves any desire for us to be like someone else or to have what anyone else has. So that when we take these two pieces of the I am a true self and I am a unique self, this understanding that knowing ourselves as a true self, we feel whole and complete as we are, and we don't need to seek anything outside of us to be fulfilled. And the understanding that knowing ourselves as a unique expression of the divine love intelligence as the unique self, that is going to dissolve any desire for us to be like anyone else or to have anything that anyone else has, because we don't need it. Or we don't need to be like anyone else because we're us and nobody can be like us, right? So all of this is are very important pieces to understand as we move into our understanding of power and powerlessness. So powerlessness, again, it happens when we fail to know our true nature as a true self and as a unique self. When we fail to know, as it says on the slide, when we fail to know our true self, we do something really, really weird and crazy, and we've all done it, and we all do it. We begin to deny aspects of ourself in order to stay safe. We begin to deny all types of things about ourselves. We deny our intuition. We deny our intelligence. We deny our creativity. We deny our ability to act. We deny our discernment. We deny all types of things about ourselves. And then what happens is we become confused, or we become unsure, or we become doubtful or anxious or unclear. All of these things begin to happen.